Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Scott Wingerter Show. Today, we're going to be speculating on who Trump might pick for his vice presidential nominee. There have been a lot of names that have been thrown out there. Many of them you probably have heard of or at least know. Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, the guys that were up on that stage debating one another without Trump being present. They weren't able to actually finish the race and become the nominee. So now that automatically throws some speculation into their camps there as to whether or not they might be picked for that important vice presidential nomination. But we will take a look at what we have going on here. So there's recently been a Economist U.gov survey which asked registered voters who they wanted to be the pick. So they gave them 10 names. So Trump's got to pick who his running mate's going to be, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be one of these people. These are just the obvious names that have been tossed around. Trump has been pretty silent about who he's thinking about. He hasn't been too vocal about it. In some cases, he says he hasn't made up his mind. In other cases, he's maybe indicated one person over another. Time will tell. But the voters, at least in this poll by The Economist and U.gov, they gave 10 names. And those names were Ben Carson, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's the governor of Arkansas and was Trump's press secretary during the early part of his administration. Governor Greg Abbott has been named, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, Kristi Noem, who's the governor of South Dakota, Hawaii, former representative from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat. She's no longer a Democrat. And Representative Elise Stefanik of New York, who helped Trump in both of his impeachments towards the end of his administration. But the number one name on there, coming in at 68%, was Governor Ron DeSantis. So let me go through real quick how these people are ranked in here. Governor DeSantis is at the top of the list with 68% approving him to be Trump's running mate, followed by Ben Carson at 60, Sarah Huckabee Sanders at 57, Greg Abbott at 56%, Vivek Ramaswamy at 55%, Senator Tim Scott at 53%, Kristi Noem at 45%, and Tulsi Gabbard at 42%. The bottom of the list is Representative Elise Stefanik coming in at 30%. You'll notice one name wasn't really on there. The one exception is Nikki Haley. 36% approved of Trump picking her, but 51% of registered Republicans and independents who end up leaning to the right disapproved of putting her on the ticket. So that's not a good sign if you're Nikki Haley and you were thinking, oh, maybe Trump will pick me for vice president. Well, 51% of the people that are going to vote for this potential ticket don't want Nikki Haley. And you can go ahead and I'll throw my card down on the table here and include me in that number. I do not want Nikki Haley to be the vice president. I think she's a disaster. And I have to say, Governor Haley, it was really entertaining to watch you just commit political suicide in front of America on TV. So thanks for that. Obviously, everybody, I think, wants Ron DeSantis, at least in this poll. I would be included in that number as well. I really think back when I had my show Impolite Company, I did a whole video on how I thought that DeSantis was the future of the Republican Party. And I still think that that is true even today, because while Trump did defeat DeSantis in the primary, I don't think DeSantis is going anywhere. I think DeSantis did himself a favor when he lost Iowa and got out. He didn't commit political suicide a la Nikki Haley, which was a smart move because Ron DeSantis is a smart guy. I think DeSantis is probably the best person to inherit the MAGA movement as that figurehead. Remember, Trump constitutionally is limited here. If he gets elected in November, which I think he will, Trump can only serve another 4 years because he's already served 4 years previously from 2017 to 2021, right? So he's done after these 4 years, which means that whoever this vice presidential pick is going to be is likely going to then be the heir presumptive, if you will, for the 2028 Republican nomination process. That's generally what happens. You know, you look at somebody like when Ronald Reagan served his first 2 terms. Then in 1988, his vice president, George Bush, H.W. Bush, George W. Bush's father, he was the vice president. He was automatically slotted into that spot and became the Republican nominee, and then won the race and became president after Ronald Reagan. So that traditionally is how all of that goes down. We haven't had that in recent times. Starting with George W. Bush, when he picked Dick Cheney as his vice president, Dick Cheney was too old, wasn't well liked, so he took himself out of that heir presumptive spot, and in 2008 did not become automatically the Republican nominee, and then we were stuck with John McCain, so that was great, right? Barack Obama, likewise, when he stepped down constitutionally after his 2 terms, his vice presidential person was, of course, Joe Biden. But because his son had just passed away from cancer, Biden was not in a place where he felt comfortable running, and so he didn't run. That's why Hillary Clinton stepped up instead. And then, of course, Trump beat her. So it's interesting to see. I mean, and I think we would run into this problem too. What are the Democrats going to do? And if the Democrats got their way, right, and Joe Biden defeats Donald Trump again in 2028, who's going to be the vice? Is the vice president Kamala Harris? Is she going to be the automatic heir presumptive of Joe Biden? Well, she's probably the least popular person in politics right now. So I don't see that being very likely either. I don't know. But I do think that if it is Ron DeSantis, as I said in some previous videos, we're going to have an issue, right? Because of the 12th Amendment. And the way that this works, right, is if I live in Florida and I'm one of the electors that gets to cast my vote for the Electoral College, I cannot vote for a guy who's president and a guy for vice president that live in the same state as me. So Florida has, all their electoral votes. Not every single elector in Florida can vote for both of them, but that's not a big deal. There are ways around that. When you go back to the 2000 presidential election with George Bush and Al Gore, Dick Cheney, which was George W. Bush's vice presidential pick, lived in Texas at the time that George Bush was governor of Texas and running for president. And he picked Dick Cheney, and all Dick Cheney had to do was switch his residency to one of his houses in Wyoming. And so that's how they got around the 12th Amendment, so that they didn't end up splitting some of those electoral votes in the state of Texas, which if you're going to be a Republican, you absolutely need to win Texas because it's the lion's share of red state electoral votes, right? So if DeSantis were to get picked, let's say, Trump could move his residency, or DeSantis could step down from being governor and he could move his residency to somewhere else. That's all it would take for that to occur. I really am I mean, I'm not Nostradamus, right? Like, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to sit here and make concrete predictions on what is going to happen because I don't know any more than anybody else. And right now, there, with all the stuff that's out there, it's just wild speculation. There's no specific evidence that Trump has a particular person in mind, at least not that I've been able to find. That being said, I think with DeSantis's approval rating among Republican voters as high as it is, especially in this particular poll, and when you look at how that all went down when DeSantis lost Iowa, he said, he came out and he's like, all right, we came in second place, which was pretty good. He gave Trump a run for his money. He came the closest to actually being competitive to Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump was really worried about DeSantis, especially early on in the primary process. And DeSantis came out and he said, all right, well, I'll see everybody in New Hampshire. Well, then a couple days later, all of a sudden, he just suspends his campaign. When that happens, you need to pay attention because that's an indication that there's something going on in the background. If you remember back in the 2020 election, Joe Biden had lost Iowa and he had lost New Hampshire. And it wasn't looking good for the Biden campaign. And then all of a sudden there was South Carolina. And right before South Carolina, you had people that were doing pretty well in the polls. People like Kamala Harris, people like Mayor Pete, that just all of a sudden dropped out of the race and endorsed Joe Biden. Well, then where did they end up when Biden became the nominee? And then Biden, of course, won the Electoral College. Well, Kamala Harris became vice president. Pete Buttigieg, a mayor of some town out in Indiana somewhere, as far as most Americans are concerned, ended up becoming the transportation secretary. So why? Well, because they were rewarded for getting out and backing Biden. DeSantis says, I'll see you in New Hampshire, and then the next day suspends his campaign and endorses Donald Trump. Maybe there's something there. Maybe not. I don't know. But it seems likely to me that there might be room somewhere in a Trump administration for Ron DeSantis. And I think being the next person in my mind who should be in the batting box, warming up to take on the MAGA movement, I think DeSantis is that guy. It would make sense to make him the vice presidential pick for Trump because I really think that those two together would be able to, I think, embody the whole MAGA movement very well. And then when Trump has to step down because he can no longer run for president in 2028, DeSantis is in the perfect position to inherit all the MAGA movement, all the MAGA supporters, and carry that torch forward. So that I would highly recommend, if I were advising Donald Trump, that's what should be done. Obviously, Republican voters, at least in this poll, also agree. And so if you're going to put a gun to my head and, make me pick who I think out of this list, Tim Scott's a good one. I think Tulsi Gabbard is an interesting choice. And while I really like her for who she is and who she's becoming, I think she's becoming more conservative. I know she was a liberal Democrat, not a leftist Democrat, but a liberal Democrat. I out of all of the Democrats that were running in 2020, I wanted her to win the Democratic nominee because if Tulsi Gabbard had beaten Donald Trump in a head-to-head election, don't you think that would have been better than what we got with mashed potato brains? I think so. Everyone should probably agree with that statement, right? But Tulsi is still coming from that Democrat liberal mindset, and I'm wondering how conservative is she actually? I like what I'm seeing. I'm seeing her. I follow her on social media. I'm seeing her go out into Arizona and, take part in Second Amendment gun shooting competitions and stuff like that. Which, okay, that's cool. That's good. I like that. That's awesome. Is it sincere? I think what we need to see is, a pattern of behavior here over time, and then maybe someday Tulsi can win over hardline conservatives like me. I'm skeptical of it, but I'm not absolutely against it. We'll see how that plays out. So, I would be really excited then if Donald Trump did end up picking Ron DeSantis. Like I said before, if I were advising President Trump on who to pick, that would be my opinion. And so let me know what you think in the comments. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Who would you like to see Trump pick as a VP in the VP spot for the Republican Party for the 2024 election? Is there somebody I've overlooked? Let me know in the comment section. And if you haven't, make sure that if you're enjoying this kind of content, that you like, follow, subscribe, and all that stuff. And that's going to help us be able to continue making videos like this for you to consume. All right. So that's all we got for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.